Kyle, appreciate you making some time for us this morning. I know this weekend has been hectic for you. Just starting out with John Ridgeway, what do you think that Jerry, Steven, and the rest of the Dallas Cowboys personnel really liked about the defensive tackle from Arkansas?
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me this morning. And I think the first thing that sticks out, and it definitely stuck out to us as well on the draft coverage, was his intensity. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that when we had him on following the pick, I mean, he's already talking about, his term was breaking necks. I mean, he was so intense and so aggressive, and that's kind of something that this team's been looking for. You could really tell throughout the draft, each selection that they made, they were looking for the size, they were looking for the traits, and a certain level of toughness as well. And I think John Ridgeway certainly showed throughout his career up there in Fayetteville that he really has that toughness. They loved that about him. And then the value that they got with him on the back end of the fifth round was certainly there, because I mean, I had him as a third-round player. The Cowboys had him as a third- or a fourth-round player, and the fact that they got him in the fifth was phenomenal value, and something that I know that they're pretty happy about, and someone they expected to be in the rotation on that defensive line.
Kyle, we know how much Jerry and Steven love their Arkansas Razorbacks. Is it a little peculiar or surprising that in 20, 30 years they've only drafted two, Felix Jones and now John Ridgeway?
Yeah, I think for the common fan that knows the connection between the Jones family and of course Arkansas, it really does puzzle the common fan. But I don't necessarily think it's that surprising when you know the way that the Jones family runs their organization. They know that it's not supposed to be. Or they know it's a business. They know that it's not personal. It's not anything like that. It's what they need to do to be successful. And sure, they've had their ups and their downs as a front office, but for the most part, they've done a pretty good job of drafting throughout. In 2008, Felix Jones was the last time. The only other time they've drafted a Razorback, and they had a lot of fun doing it this time, I'll tell you that much. I mean, there were a lot of high fives in that war room. There were a lot of smiles and jokes. I'm sure they were calling the Hawks for a little bit of it, and they had their fair share of jokes along the way, but you can't really knock them for any sort of Razorback bias with the fact that they've only taken two. They've got a track record of being exceptionally fair and taking the player that fits the need. And just in this occasion, and as it did in 2008 with Felix Jones, it fit the need that the Cowboys needed, so they took advantage.
Speaking of fitting needs, the first pick with their first pick for the Cowboys, the 24th overall pick, was an offensive tackle and Tyler Smith out of Tulsa. What was the reaction there locally that probably fit a need but didn't have the splash that maybe a skill position player would have had by taking an offensive tackle first?
Well, there was a pretty good indication going into the weekend that it was going to be an offensive lineman, period. It wasn't necessarily the Tyler Smith telegraphed pick. They thought, or at least the local media, me included, thought it was going to be Zion Johnson out of Boston College or Kenyon Green from Texas A&M, both guards, both offensive linemen that were going to be plug-and-play starters in week one. Well, neither one of those guys were available for the Cowboys whenever they got up to the clock at 24. And even if they were, I don't know if they would have been taken over Tyler Smith. The Cowboys really liked the fit of a younger, developmental, and by developmental, I don't necessarily mean, sit red shirt for a couple of years and then come in and finally play. I mean an instant starter that's going to develop into a high-end NFL player. They like his upside. He just turned 21 a couple days ago, and despite a little bit of disappointment around the pick initially from a local standpoint, I think the more that they learned about Tyler Smith and what he brings to the table as a guy who can maybe slide inside, play guard initially, and then bump out to tackle whenever needed, either in the middle of the season with Tyron Smith and potential injury issues there, or when he's done playing in a couple of years. I think the possibilities with Tyler Smith is pretty high, and I think the local side of things is really kind of taken to that the more that they learn about the pick.
Kyle, there's a narrative out there that Jerry Jones has not done a good job with personnel and that his draft selections haven't worked out. But then I read this note at Yahoo Sports. It said the Cowboys have drafted a future Pro Bowler with 10 of their past 12 first-round selections. Is the narrative around Jerry and maybe his handling of personnel and his draft selections fair when you read a number like 10 of the last 12 end up in the Pro Bowl? That's a pretty good track record, particularly with your first-round picks.
Yeah, I think it's a great track record. They've had more Pro Bowlers drafted in the first, I think, since first round since 2010 than any other team in the NFL, and I think All-Pro is also in that category as well. So they have hit their first-round picks, and those are the picks that you have to hit on. I think where the criticism kind of lies is what have they done in the second round and the third round recently? Outside of maybe a Trayvon Diggs, a Neville Gallimore, a Michael Gallup, the last 5 years or so, they've really struggled to hit their second-round picks. I mean, Connor Williams not on the team anymore. Yeah, he started for a couple of years, but you wouldn't necessarily call him a game changer as a second-round pick. You could say the same thing about Tristan Hill in 2019. He hasn't necessarily made an impact. And then everybody's also going to remember the misses as well. I mean, Morris Claiborne and Taco Charlton, both notable misses that didn't necessarily pan out the way that they thought in the first round. And outside of those guys, I really do think that the family, or the front office rather, has drafted really well over the last decade or so. And if you can hit on your first round picks, you're gonna cover a lot of holes. It's just those next level premium picks that they've really struggled to hit on as of late. They're hoping that they can turn that around with the picks that they made this past weekend.
We're talking with Kyle Youmans this morning, DallasCowboys.com. Kyle, we were talking about minicamp earlier. Former Razorback basketball player Trey Wade got invited to Arizona Cardinals minicamp. Can you just kind of explain what that looks like, the setup, who's invited, whether it's rookies, veterans, just to give our audience a better perspective of what minicamp's not just in Arizona but all across the board in the NFL?
Yeah, well, the initial part, at least for the Cowboys side of things, is a lot of classroom work. They really want to install the offense early on, and Mike McCarthy talked about it a lot last year in the fact that they finally had the mini camps as opposed to the year prior where with COVID-19 and some of the restrictions that they had in their offseason in 2020, a lot of it was virtual, and they didn't have the on-field mini camps the way that you normally do. And so it allows teams to get the younger prospects ready to go for OTAs. They want to install the offense, get them more familiar with the playbook, let them start digesting all of this information so that way whenever OTAs kind of come around a couple weeks following mini camp, not only have they been on the field and they've seen what the facility has in store and where to go, what to do, and how to handle yourself, but they have a comfort level from a playbook standpoint and from a rep standpoint, because they'll go up against each other. They may not put on the pads, but at any point throughout the minicamp standpoint, but they will go up against each other. They'll have some quality reps, and then when OTAs come around and they start working directly with these veterans, they'll have a pretty good idea of what they bring to the table and what they're expected to do as a rookie class coming in.
Kyle, I know a good chunk of our audience, as we close you down here, got a chance to watch Hard Knocks and your team go into Oxnard and and it was just a cool, unique situation. Now, are you back at the Star in studio for all of that, or do you go with the team and do live stuff and get to really feel what training camp's like down there in California?
Yeah, I got to go this past year. It was my second year on air with the team, and I got to chance to go down there for the first time because I wasn't there, or we didn't go as a team in 2020. So, yeah, last year was my first opportunity. It's funny, you mentioned Hard Knocks. I mean, one of the first voices on there was one of our podcasts that I was hosting. But, yeah, the whole conversation around it was that it was the perfect setup, the perfect weather, and that's the whole reason they go out there. And it really was. I mean, it was 80 degrees as a high. It would get kind of chilly at night, and it had a briskness to it that you don't necessarily get whenever you're in Arkansas. Knows this as well, but whenever you're in the middle of the summer, you don't have that heat. You don't have that searing heat like you would in Texas or Arkansas. So it really was. It was a phenomenal setup, and it's definitely exciting the fact that you get to go out there on a yearly basis.
Kyle, we appreciate you jumping on with us this morning. Again, Kyle Youmans, pre- and post-game for DallasCowboys.com, also Talking Cowboys and the Draft Show. Kyle, enjoy the rest of the offseason, man. Excited to see what the Dallas Cowboys can do in the NFC East in 2022.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, including updated odds on the NBA playoffs, fights, and even next season's futures. And don't forget that the MLB is back as well. Who are you picking to win the World Series? BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to join and use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.